We welcome you wherever you come from. We welcome you whoever you are. We welcome you. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian Church of Toledo. I'm Joe Moran and I'm this morning's worship associate. Whoever you are and wherever you come from, we're glad you are here with us this morning.
And I'm Reverend Tim Barger. I'm the senior minister at First Unitarian Church of Toledo. And I also add a welcome to you here in the sanctuary and our viewers on our Toledo Unitarians YouTube channel. Today, on our minds, in our hearts, and with our spirits, there are people in our circles who, with their family and friends, are navigating issues of life and death, health and illness, home and travel, financial security, and more debt than they can manage well. There are also new lives born and many other joys and celebrations. Probably all of us experience combinations of comfort and challenge. May we be compassionate to all, as we don't know what other people are going through. So treat one another well, giving dignity and compassion. This is the season of Lent for Christians, a time of religious renewal in a way, with penitence and attention. And many Unitarian Universalists have taken our Christian heritage of Lent and apply it for Lent with greater religious contemplation. The Islamic holy month of Ramadan, a similar time of religious rededication, began last Wednesday. This is a season for many to examine their being in the world and how they approach life, the universe, and everything. Spring and spirit are all around. We also have on our minds, in our hearts, with our spirits, the fact that there is war in our world. There is disaster by nature and disaster caused by humans. That inequality, inequity, and racism are in our societies, and we can do our own parts not to oppress, to celebrate many cultures, to grow in self and universally. One reason we join in religious gatherings is to realize common links. The uncommon is here too. Let's be together in faith, hope, and love, physically and in spirit.
And I share these opening words. Listen, the Spirit is calling, by John Saxon. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It calls us in the silence and through noise and the busyness of our daily lives. It calls us in the brightness of the day and the darkness of the night, in times of hope and in times of despair. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It doesn't matter what you call it, for it has no name, and it has many names. The Spirit of life, Spirit of love, Spirit of compassion, Spirit of hope, the Spirit of justice. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It's calling to you and me. It's calling us to greater wholeness, greater connection, greater service, and greater love. It's calling us to heal the brokenness within ourselves and others and in this world. It's calling us to live more deeply. It's calling us to beauty. It's calling us to laugh and dance and sing. It's calling us to live through life's pain and sorrow. It's calling us to live courageously and kindly, to speak the truth in love, and to bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice. It's calling us in a community, and it's calling us all to a greater life. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling.
As Joe lights our chalice, I have these words of Cynthia Landrum. We light this chalice, the beacon that calls us to love, to justice, to a deepening of the Spirit. And if you would join me in reciting the covenant of this congregation, love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Our opening hymn is number 313 with the intriguing title, "Oh, What a Piece of Work Are We?" Please stand as you're willing and able.
Oh, what a piece of work are we, how marvelously wrought, the quick contrivance of the hand, the wonder of our thought, the wonder of our thought. Why need to look for miracles outside of nature's law? Humanity we wonder at with every breath we draw. With every breath we draw. But give us room to move and grow, until our spirit may, and we can make a world of light out of the common clay, out of the common clay.
Well, if the young and the young of heart want to come forward for a moment. If not, I'll just tell you the story. First, let me greet you. OCO. You can say
OCO.
back. All right. Now, back in time immemorial, Possum and Rabbit were friends. Possum was a healer. Rabbit was a trickster. Keep that in mind. And one day they were talking together and they both said, you know, we're both tired of the bachelor life. Why don't we go out and look for a wife? And so they set out. And after a while, they come to a village. At the edge of the village, there's a woman weaving a basket. And Possum goes up to her and says, "Where's your husband?" She said, "I have no husband." He said, "Ah, would you be interested in a husband?" And she said, "You're Possum, and I know you're friends with Rabbit, and Rabbit is a trickster, and I don't want to get involved in that." And so Possum and Rabbit went on their way, came to another village. And as they came to that village, a young woman was just coming out of the women's council. Possum goes up to the young woman and says, "Osio, where's your husband?" She says, "I have no husband." She says, and the Possum said, "Wouldn't you be interested in having a husband?" And she looked at him and says, "I'm sure you're a very fine individual, Possum, but I know you're friends with Rabbit, and Rabbit is a trickster. I don't think I want to get involved in that." So Rabbit and Possum move on. Now they see another village in the distance. This is the village of the animals, where Bear is chief. Rabbit says, "We haven't had any luck in the two previous villages. Let me go ahead and see what I can arrange." So Rabbit goes ahead. And he goes to the house where the chief lives. That's Bear. Now you want to be careful with Bear. Even to this day, Bear can be a rough customer. He can get awful grumpy. But he happens to be the chief of the woodland animals. Rabbit goes in to Bear and he says to Bear, "Bear, there's someone coming that I think you need to be aware of. I think he might even be a danger to you." And Bear says, "We must be ready for battle." And he summons all his best warriors together in the house. And Rabbit leaves the house and goes back to where Possum is. Now, I should mention that the house is pretty dark. And he tells Possum, "Possum, I found a bride for you. And she's waiting for you in the big house in the village just up ahead. And all you got to do is just go in there and just proclaim your love to her, and everything will be just fine." So Possum goes into the village, comes to the big house. It's kind of dark. And he goes into the house, and he can sense somebody's there, and he thinks it's the bride-to-be, and he just puts out his arms, and he gives a big kiss on the cheek of Bear. And Bear's not too happy about this. He thinks he's being assaulted, and all his warriors think he's being assaulted. And they gang up on Possum. Now, I should mention that Possum at this time had a very fluffy tail. But Possum had to get out of that house as quick as he could. And they grabbed him by the tail and they pulled all the hair off of it. And once he was outside, he flopped down and he played dead. Bear and his warriors came out of the house. He says, "Oh no, we've killed Possum, our healer. We have done a terrible thing." Bear and his warriors went off to mourn, and when they went off, Rabbit came and found Possum. Possum came to and he said, "Rabbit, I'm never going to talk to you again." Now, the story may seem like a somewhat humorous folktale to us, but the Cherokee told stories like this with lessons embedded in them. The lesson in this is that we have boundaries. Rabbit violated Possum's boundaries by playing this particular trick on him. It went too far. And as a result, even to this day, you will not see Rabbit and Possum together. And that's the end of my story and the beginning of our lesson.
Though I may stream with grace fire and have the gift to all inspire and have not all my words convey and sunny grass and glorious day. Though I may give all I possess, and striving soul, my love profess, the rock of ages, my rock within, the prophets true, church strangely did, from spirit calm, God's control, our spirits all to be made whole, that inward love guide every day. By this we worship and are free.
Thank you. Before we get to our time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer, I feel the need to say something about my voice today. It sounds a little unusual, at least to me. This past week, I visited the dentist for the first time since my stem cell transplant a year ago. So my 1-year-old immune system is having a little bit of struggle with irritation to the back of the throat. So if I end up losing my voice, that's the excuse. Blame Dr. Hashim, who is a very good dentist. Please join me for a time of meditation, contemplation, and prayer. These are words of Peter Morales, a former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. What does deep spirituality feel like to you? Spirituality is impossible to define and difficult to describe. For me, it feels like connection to myself, to others around me, to the earth and all of creation. Connection to myself feels like deep peace, awareness, calm, authenticity. Connection to others feels like compassion, community, acceptance, and enduring love. Spirituality is not an idea, it is an experience. When I experience connection, dividing lines disappear. Inner conflict gives way to integrity. The line that separates my individuality from others fades. We become one. I find connections with my deepest self in times of solitary practice and reflection. I find connection with others in community, often in worship. All the great spiritual traditions teach this. Today, the connection with creation, with the earth and the cosmos, may be the most difficult. We live in artificial, controlled environments that separate us from the natural world. More than humans in any other time, we live separated from the natural world, the world from which we emerged, and that sustains our lives. We so very much need to experience our world. We need to let go of controlling our world and allow ourselves to become one with it. We find ourselves when we lose ourselves. May we connect, really connect. When we do, it changes everything. Let's observe 1 minute of silence, hearing only the sounds around us.
Gifts to thee. Oh, bind our hearts with sin. In faith and hope, charity.
Our readings during this Lenten series on spirit are musical. This morning, Jeffrey tells us what we got to do when the Spirit says do.
You gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, oh Lord. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. We're gonna do that again. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. You gotta do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do, oh Lord, you got to do when the Spirit says do. Spirit says do, 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 Spirit says do. Spirit says do.
Since February 26th, During the Christian season of Lent and our variation of UU Lent that draws from our denominational Christian heritage and gives a little bit of presence today to self-examination along with religious contemplation. Our Sunday services have been on the topic of spirit. Let's have one more addressing Unitarian Universalist spirit, and then take a week for our twice-a-year music service. We have considered spirit of truth, spirit of unity, spirit of love, and spirit of life. I think I can safely say that all of those are parts of Unitarian Universalist spirit. So today we more directly address our use of the word spirit, with the adjective being Unitarian Universalist, not a spirit of a concept, but the spirit of our ways. Some people in our congregation are reluctant to use terms of reverence, which are so interwoven into religious language that even those of us who are non-believers must have some versatility in hearing them used and sometimes using that terminology ourselves. But we must, as a religious organization, regardless of our taking up strong reliance on science and reason, still use the language of our own history. And that even means faith and God at times. But today is primarily spirit. I urge you, even if you place so much faith in the scientific method that you might miss some of the less grounded ways we humans behave and interact, to recognize that we need a full vocabulary. And at the same time, we can use metaphor. It's not all just the facts, but the story of life. Science and spirit can coexist. Spirit is a heavy word, though it can be light in describing what spirit is. The root words for spirit mean breath, something natural which in our bodies can be automatic and intentional. For we're always breathing, and sometimes we take breaths. Spirit isn't some kind of supernatural creature, no angel. That's an example of where you can apply metaphor. I call spirit the sense of awe we all get at the times we consider our place in life, the universe, and everything. That phrase of Douglas Adams that I like but try not to overuse. I've only used it twice this Sunday. We've all had times, I think, of pondering how each of us is one of 8 billion people on this planet. And there's so much more life here than humans. And then that 1/8 billionth becomes much more of a speck when we look at the sky and see so many stars and wonder if there's life beyond us. Pondering the place of us and of all is a spiritual exercise, I'd say. So spirit might be our being, our seeking, our experience of the unusual, and even of the usual. Most of you know that I'm a religious humanist, and religious humanism differentiates a bit from secular humanism in that we come together at 11 on Sunday mornings in a group called a congregation, and we focus for an hour on being together with songs, stories, and an inward turning whether that's called meditation, contemplation, or prayer, and have a message in the context of our Unitarian Universalist religion that is focused on this world we know. So sometimes ministers' words are about social justice, other times nature and history and the state of things, and also a lot of the time on our being in the world as liberal religious people. Not necessarily theistic, but knowing that some of the people we're here with are believers in God, while others have no beliefs or have a personal combination of the religion of their rearing and the religion they developed when they started their own ways and found some type of comfort in Unitarian Universalism. And we can be multi faith, which includes people of no faith. All of that can have elements of spirit in the interpretation. I say we're seekers and sometimes finders, and we're together on Sunday mornings supporting one another in our Unitarian Universalist spirituality. A little bit more on the humanist approach. The American Humanist Association's website, in stating what humanism is, starts with a quotation of Kurt Vonnegut Jr., an author who had been the honorary president of the American Humanist Association and who also had been a member of the Community Church of New York, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. The American Humanist Association, by the way, was begun by the Unitarian ministers Curtis Reese and John Dietrich. And many Unitarian ministers and a couple of Universalist ministers signed the Humanist Manifesto of 1933. Kurt Vonnegut, the American Humanist Association cites, said that being a humanist means trying to behave decently without expectation of rewards or punishment after you are dead. Curtis Reese, in a 1945 book published by Beacon Press, a then Unitarian and now Unitarian Universalist owned publishing house that prints books for the general public, not just Unitarian Universalists, but it has a Unitarian Universalist principled element in its decisions of what to publish, wrote, "The physical and the spiritual, the sacred and the secular, and the like must be woven into a unified whole. We Unitarian Universalists, not just the Unitarian Universalist humanists, but all of us Unitarian Universalists, might be well positioned to be the weavers making it whole." In his 1951 book, Humanist Ethics, Gardner Williams, who was a member of First Unitarian Church of Toledo, wrote that the human nervous system, and especially the central portion of it, the brain, is the real spiritual substance of man. He's using a gendered term in this book that we would avoid today. That is, he continues, the brain is a substance. It is a structured constellation of energies which are part of the substantial structured energy of the total universe, the supreme being. And it has spiritual properties or qualities. By spiritual qualities, I mean all the major interests and a few other things besides. I mean such traits as freedom, reason, loyalty, love, and a passion for justice and for truth. These are of the essence of the human spirit. Williams writes that spirit is a concept that fits with humanism, and that it's part of what we're concerned with on earth, not just a religious speculation of an otherworldly realm. Quote, the desires for economic sufficiency, affluence, and security are spiritual things, Williams writes. They are aspects of some of the most powerful and basic interests which constitute the human spirit. Obviously, they have been important factors in determining the human behavior which has molded history. Their perversion, greed, and avarice still pertain to the human spirit. These are things that have gone wrong with the spirit. They might be called unspiritual in the sense of being bad spirit. Remember, this is a humanist philosopher writing, someone from our own congregation, though 72 years ago. The Toledo Unitarians have that humanist DNA as part of our Unitarian Universalist spirit. Gardner Williams says that the supreme being is the ultimate reality or substance of the universe. It is not supernatural, he states. God, in Williams's approach, is also not supernatural, but is the abstract principle of divinity and duty. God is the ideal standard or principle of man's highest good. We have seen in one sense that it is purely individual and in another universal. I add that Unitarian Universalist spirit, as I can understand it, is both individual, take the uni from Unitarian, and universal. So you can apply Universalist there. God, Gardner Williams continues, is that to which man can give rationally the last full measure of devotion. It is the object of his chronically recurrent rational drive toward perfection. Some people might object to usage of the term spirit as a turnoff. And I'm fine with spirit, but while agreeing with Williams's concept here, I struggle with his use of the term God. Most of the time, I don't use that God word, as it's easily misinterpreted, and I'd say even more misunderstood in a humanist approach. Some of you object to spirit and other terms as too reverential, and I don't like to use God as it's open to so much interpretation of belief and being. The spiritual validity of this principle of divinity harmonizes perfectly with a naturalistic metaphysics, Williams writes. I would use naturalistic metaphysics without putting God as a factor. But I'm good with spirit, and I hope you who have followed this series understand, either plainly or in some conceptual translation, whether humanist or philosophically something else, what I'm getting to with Unitarian Universalist spirit. I think for a congregation, a church, even a liberal religious one like First Unitarian Church of Toledo, spiritual is an appropriate term. I think it's a good word for our Unitarian Universalist concept of religion, including topics of organized and institutional religion, social justice, people's stories, play, and much more. We can talk about just about anything in sermons in our Sunday services, though we risk boring some people and being too ethereal to be understood too. So I've talked about spirit more than in just these past 5 weeks. And consider how versatile the word spirit is. We've stuck to the churchy aspect, but there's much more that can be considered religious, as religion is a very wide-ranging concept. Spirit can be a principle, an essence, a supernatural being if you believe in the supernatural, or using metaphor, you understand others' stories of the supernatural, a god or a ghost. Spirit can be abstract, but the vitalizing aspect of a person. Spirit can be something you imagine, you feel, or even possibly a type of energy, actual wind even. Plus, think of spirit as an adjective. There's spirit gum, gluing on fake beards for actors. The spirit duplicator, those mimeograph machines from my childhood and some of yours that used some chemical smelling solution to give purple colored print to paper that went through a stencil. And of course, alcohol for drinking known as spirits. Is that for the distillation of the liquid, or the way consuming spirits can change a person's behavior? We're spiritual beings. Spirit might be how our minds fit our bodies. I hope you come to our liberal religious church to cultivate your own spirits of truth, of unity, of love, of life, of your Unitarian Universalist spirit, of more, better, to make a spirit of change in this world, a world that we want so much to be in its best spirits. Be spiritual, so be it.
We now come to the offering portion of our service, and there are numerous ways you can support the mission and ongoing work of this church, both inside and outside its walls. On the screen, they should be able to bring up that you can go to uutoledo.org, our website, click on Give, and then on Online Giving. You could also reach us and send us checks through First Unitarian Church, our address 3205 Glendale, Toledo 43614. They're in the front of your pew. There are envelopes that donations can be made to the church and designated how that's to be given. And as you leave the sanctuary, in the basket to the left, there is a basket there that also loose offerings can be placed in. Thank you for your contributions.
And for our offertory song, let's have a congregational sing of number 13, Songs of Spirit.
Singing in the morning light, in the radiance of the day, in the twilight shadows gray, in the brooding hush of night, dark or light or storm or fair, singing, singing everywhere. In the burgeoning of spring, in the summer scented bloom, in the autumn's mellow glow, in the winter's ice and snow, shade or shine or joy or gloom, as the
and bare or blossoming, still the songs that sing and sing. Singing, singing everywhere, at the heart of everything. In my soul I hear them sing, mystic music of the spheres, song that with my utmost heart I can only catch in part. Broken echoes old and bare of the songs my spirit hears.
It's the coming soon portion of our service, and please check our UUFYI publication, which is emailed and posted in our private Facebook group. Plus, there are a few printed copies you'll find in the lobby for announcements of what is coming up for the week. This week, we highlight two events that are coming soon. First, in response to the Protecting Our Youth from Violence event that Unitarian Action presented on Wednesday, which, by the way, we had 78 people in attendance. We'll have a follow-up roundtable discussion this Tuesday at 6 p.m. in Fellowship Hall. You're invited to attend and to help us figure out how we can put our thoughts into action. Every voice is important, so please bring yours this Tuesday evening. The second event we highlight comes after church next Sunday. Our coffee hour after the service will include a potluck, so please bring food with you in a container that's disposable. Then please stay for the workshop starting at 1 p.m. and ending at 4:30 p.m. on the proposed Unitarian Universalist 8th principle, which emphasizes anti-racism and building a beloved community. It will be led by Paula Cole-Jones, a management consultant and diversity strategist who is active as a layperson in Unitarian Universalist work with congregations and the denomination. She will join us via Zoom. If you can't attend in person, you can join us by Zooming in on our regular church connection. We plan to have a congregational vote on endorsing the 8th principle at our annual meeting on May the 21st. Please see our Unitarian media for more information.
And next Sunday's spiritual forum will be at 9:45 a.m. in Fellowship Hall. Our friends Doug Berger and Sean Megley of the Secular Humanists of Western Lake Erie will be our speakers. I'm a former board member of that organization, so I'm glad that Doug and Sean will be here to add to the humanist perspectives of us Toledo Unitarians. Then for our 11 a.m. service Sunday here in the sanctuary, we'll have Music is Love and Peace, our twice-a-year all-music service with our choir, David Strickler, Melissa Jeter, other musicians, including perhaps surprise guests, and our music director, Jeffrey Baxey. Take in the sounds and catch the energy and feel the love and peace that music is bringing to our Sundays.
And you're reminded right after the service today to join us in Fellowship Hall for coffee hour and social time. If you happen to be a visitor with us today, we'll be happy to answer questions you might have about Unitarianism or First Unitarian Church, and we're of course interested in hearing your own stories. I have these closing words by Kenneth R. Warren. May the love that is the doctrine of this church be also the strength and the spirit of this congregation and of our individual lives.
As Joe extinguishes our chalice, metaphorically consider the smoke that rises after the flame as the Unitarian Universalist spirit coming into the community. May that spirit our spirits be engaged in the transformation of the world through liberating love.
We kind of just were looking at their hymnals the whole time, like. I screwed up that one song. I screwed up.
You started out
That's
the
why I
wrong-
want to do it again.
Yeah,
Do
you
it right.
started out at a really jolly tempo and, yeah.
Okay, sweetheart. Oh my God, that was so fast. I can't think of this. So Thursday we'll meet. Actually, we'll just meet out here.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Don't